So I know a lot of people feel like their money disappears every month. You check your bank account at the end of the month and it's empty, and you don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. However, your money disappears, and you don't have anything left over to save. To be honest, I think most people have been in this situation. You get stuck in this loop of receiving your paycheck, paying your bills, paying automatic monthly payments, and suddenly you're left with $0. I have been in this situation in my younger days because you don't really learn about personal finance through school. So you're kind of dependent on having someone close to you teaching you about it when you're young. And most people just don't have such a person in their life to teach them. So most people learn about personal finances in their early 20s when they start working in their first jobs and making the realization that they might want to pursue something else in the long term. Maybe they want to buy a house, retire early, or have kids. And this is when most people wake up to personal finance. I was kinda lucky. I became very interested in personal finance when I was around 16, 17 and started studying business. However, I think a big game changer is when you realize you cannot continue this cycle of receiving your paycheck and spending it all without investing anything. Of course, how much you want to save depends on your goals. For instance, if you want to achieve FIRE, financial independence, retire early, you should probably save a large amount of your income. But when you first make this realization, it is easy to become overwhelmed. Where should I start? This is another place where I notice a lot of people get discouraged and give up. And this is a huge mistake, because making the realization is approximately 80% of the work, I would say. If you manage to push through the discouragement and learn about budgeting, investing, and building your finances, you will most likely be on a great path towards your financial future, especially if you learn these things while you're young. I'm not saying you have to become a financial expert, but just learning the very basics early on will help you tremendously in the long run. And even just having a simple plan towards where you want to be will help you tremendously with how strictly you should budget, how much you should save, and so on. I recommend using an investment calculator to see how much you should save to achieve your goals. And I'm not saying that everything has not increased massively in price. We can just look at a chart of inflation and see that it is crazy, especially the last couple of years during COVID and so on. Or you can simply go to the store and see that food has increased massively in price. However, this is not where most people end up spending a lot of their money. I think a lot disappears into self-gratification. Society keeps telling you to reward yourself instantly for your hard work, instead of waiting for delayed gratification, which will feel so much better. So you become kind of brainwashed into believing money is something you use to reward yourself instantaneously, instead of using it as a tool to achieve financial independence. Also, using money has become so ridiculously easy. For instance, in the past we paid with cash, but nowadays most people pay with a debit card, which just goes so quickly. When you use cash, there's more of a mental barrier to spending. There's even some actual research on this. If you spend actual physical money, it causes you more discomfort than using a debit card. These companies are also trying to get the most amount of money out of each one of their consumers, and they're becoming better and better at it. For instance, monthly subscription plans have become very normal, because they allow companies to make more money out of us. But this is where you can separate yourself from your peers. If you manage to not get trapped in 30 subscription plans, you can stay a step ahead. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have Spotify or Netflix as long as they fit into your financial plan, but you should be aware of how much you're spending each month on subscriptions. We also get pressured so heavily through social media and other social media platforms to spend money on things we don't need or necessarily like. You see these other people living this fictional great life, spending a lot of money on vacations and other things, but you don't know what is happening behind the scenes. So don't become discouraged when you see someone your age flexing on Instagram. It is kind of cliche, but don't compare yourself to people. You don't know where they started. Maybe they had rich parents to help them out early. Maybe they had someone to guide them on personal finances when they were young. Your starting positions might differ very greatly. However, if you focus on your own situation and on where you want to end up, you can reach small, consistent goals and achieve fulfillment in your life. However, to solve the issue of disappearing money, I recommend sitting down and going through your expenses the last couple of months. This can be very unpleasant, and for many it is a big reality check. When you see where and how your money is spent, you might become shocked. When you sum up everything, you might see that you have some subscriptions you can cancel. Or maybe you notice you're going out to eat a little bit too often. To further solidify the habit, I would recommend creating a very simple budget. It does not have to be very detailed if you don't want it to be. However, something simple like saying, I'm not going to spend more than $250 a month on going out to eat. By first looking at your expenses, you also get an idea of how much you have to spend every month. For instance, you have to have a roof over your head, you need food, electricity, water, and so on. But by creating a budget, you manage to find out how much you can save each month, and how strictly a budget will have to depend on your goals. I hope some of what I went through might help someone out there getting started on their financial journey. I'll go further into these topics in later videos, so if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like and subscribe.